The day the final payment cleared, I came home with a quiet kind of triumph. For years, the mortgage had felt like a second heartbeat, steady and relentless. But now the weight was gone. I set the keys on the kitchen table, letting myself breathe in the silence of victory. Morella's heels clicked across the tile, sharp as her voice. "Perfect," she said, lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Now hand over the keys. This house belongs to your sister." I blinked. Sure, I'd misheard. But Celine was already drifting through the living room with her phone held high, narrating a video tour for her followers. "And here's my new place," she chirped, panning across the walls I had painted late into the night after work. The room tilted, my throat tightened as if every sacrifice, every sleepless hour had been erased in a single breath. My chest rose with words I wanted to shout that every dollar had been mine, that this house stood because of me, but no sound came. Instead, I froze, holding the weight of their smug glances. Morella tapped her fingers against the counter. "Don't make this dramatic. You've done your part. Now, let Celine live the life she deserves." Heat surged under my skin, but I forced my voice steady. I leaned forward, meeting my mother's eyes, and whispered 4 words. Just 4, but they stopped her mid-smirk, her breath catching as color drained from her face. Celine laughed, dismissing me with a flick of her wrist. Morella recovered quickly, narrowing her eyes. "You don't mean that," she said, voice brittle, but her hand trembled as she reached for the keys. I didn't move them. I only sat back, letting the silence stretch, already knowing this was only the beginning. When Morella's finances collapsed, it was like a quiet storm no one else seemed to notice. Bills stacked on the counter, late notices hidden under magazines, and the steady hum of her voice insisting everything was handled. I knew better. I was the one who stepped into the bank, signed my name on the papers, and agreed to a mortgage that would bleed me $7,500 every month. I told myself it was temporary, a bridge until my mother regained her footing. That bridge stretched into years. I worked through nights when the glow of my laptop was the only light in the house, taking side projects, answering emails at dawn, canceling vacations before they were even planned. My salary went into the payments, my side income into repairs and upgrades. I carried it all quietly, believing silence was a form of love. Morella took that silence and twisted it. She told neighbors and relatives I was comfortable, that I didn't really carry weight. My sacrifices, invisible by design, became fuel for her story that I contributed less than I did. And Celine, well, she was always the chosen one. When we were girls, Morella cheered for her smallest victories, Celine's solo in the school play, her passing grade in math. For me, the bar shifted higher each time. "Your season will come," she'd say, patting my shoulder as if patience were a prize. I believed her for far too long. Even our neighbor Mrs. Keaton once tilted her head as she watched Celine's car parked in my assigned spot. "Why do they always take your space?" she asked. I laughed it off, saying it didn't matter, though deep down I knew it did. Every compromise, every quiet surrender had trained them to believe my sacrifices were air, and now, on the day I finally cleared the mortgage, they stood in my kitchen acting as if the house had never been mine. Looking back, I realized my mother's demand for the keys hadn't been born that day. It had been rehearsed for years, whispered like prophecy whenever Celine stumbled and Morella needed to soothe her bruised pride. "One day this house will be your start," she told her, over and over, as if my work and sacrifices were just placeholders for Celine's comfort. Celine tried her hand at everything, an online boutique that folded within months, a pop-up jewelry stall that drained credit cards, a wellness blog that ended when she couldn't commit to posting. Each time she failed, Morella rushed to soften the fall, a loan disguised as a gift, rent quietly covered, Excuses spun at family gatherings about how Celine was just too creative to be boxed in. The rescues only strengthened her entitlement. Why fight for stability when it was always delivered to her doorstep? I became the contrast: steady, unglamorous, dependable. To Morella, my coding job was invisible labor, while Celine's flailing ventures were celebrated as ambition. Morella called her the daughter who looked like success, polished and photogenic enough to carry the family's image. I was the one who paid, but she was the one paraded. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My mother's smile when she asked for the keys wasn't spontaneous. It was the final act of a script she'd been directing for decades. Celine playing the heroine, Morella orchestrating the applause, and me cast as the stagehand who disappears when the curtain falls. That night, sitting with the weight of their expectation pressing against me, I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a sudden burst of greed. It was the story they had written long before I ever signed the mortgage papers, and they truly believed I would follow the script to the end. I watched Morella's hand hover above the keys, her nails glinting under the kitchen light. The room felt too small. Every breath caught in the air between us. I leaned forward and said the 4 words again, slowly this time, letting them sink into the silence. Check your certified mail. For a moment, no one moved. Celine laughed as if I had told a bad joke, waving her phone around to capture the moment. But Morella's eyes narrowed. She knew me well enough to sense the weight in my voice. What she didn't know was how long I had been preparing for this day. Months earlier, when she first hinted that the house should be signed over to Celine once you're done paying, something inside me shifted. That night, after they had gone to bed, I opened my laptop and sent an email to Graham Ortiz, a real estate attorney I'd met through a client. I told him I needed clarity, maybe even protection. Graham was calm, methodical. He checked the title. Every line confirmed the house was mine alone. He walked me through options most people never think about until it's too late. Notices revoking informal occupancy, scheduled lock changes with civil standby, protective orders if harassment crossed the line. It felt extreme at first, almost paranoid, but each time Morella dropped another comment about Celine's future here, I realized caution was my only safeguard. We created a plan the final mortgage payment would trigger the next steps. Documents were drafted, ready to send. A locksmith was scheduled for the morning after payoff, with an officer notified in advance. Every safeguard was set quietly in motion. So when I whispered those words to my mother, I wasn't bluffing. I was calling in months of careful preparation. The same silence I had once used to keep the peace now became my shield. One signed page at a time. Morella's smirk faltered, her hand retreating from the keys. She tried to recover, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Celine rolled her eyes, convinced I was bluffing. I let them believe whatever they wanted. By the next morning, they would know the truth. 2 nights later, Morella insisted on a family dinner. She called it a celebration, though I knew it was something else. The dining room was crowded with aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been drawn in by promises of a big announcement. I stayed quiet at the end of the table, watching as Morella lifted her glass with a practiced smile. "To Celine," she declared, her voice ringing with pride. "Tonight we celebrate her new beginning in this beautiful home." Applause rippled around the table. Chairs scraped as people leaned in to hug her, their words spilling over with congratulations. I felt my fork slip in my hand. "This isn't Celine's house," I said, my voice clear but even. "I made every payment. The deed is in my name." The room fell briefly still before Morella's laugh cut through the silence. "You see, always dramatic. Don't spoil the moment." Murmurs of agreement followed, eyes turning toward me with polite disapproval. Celine leaned back, smirking. "Relax, Novalie. You can crash on someone's couch for a while. Maybe it'll be good for you." Heat flushed through me, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I slipped my phone under the table. Opening my email, I typed quickly, attaching photos of the title documents, mortgage receipts, and the draft notices Graham had helped prepare. With a single click, the evidence was on its way to his inbox. Morella's voice rose again, triumphant as she painted me ungrateful before the relatives. I watched her bask in their approval, not realizing every word was another piece of proof. I didn't need to shout to make myself heard. The record was speaking louder than I ever could. When the plates were cleared and the laughter died down, I knew the stage they had built for me was collapsing, and I had already moved the play elsewhere. After the dinner, I stepped outside into the night air, the weight of their voices still pressing against my chest. I pulled out my phone, scrolled past unread messages, and tapped the only number that mattered. Graham answered on the second ring, his tone steady as ever. "It's time," I said. He didn't need me to explain. We had rehearsed this moment too many times already. Within the hour, a courier was scheduled to deliver the notice of revocation of license to occupy. Every word of that document had been drafted weeks earlier, signed, notarized, and waiting for the day the final payment cleared. The house might have felt like a battlefield, but on paper, it was mine alone. Graham confirmed the rest of the plan, the locksmith appointment for early morning. The civil standby arranged through the local precinct, even a temporary protective order drafted in case Morella or Celine tried to force their way back in. Nothing about this was sudden. It was the quiet architecture of foresight, built while everyone else mocked me for being too cautious. I sat in my car outside the house, the glow from the dashboard painting the silence around me. For the first time in years, my lungs filled all the way. I had spent so long bending under their expectations, shrinking myself to keep peace that never existed. Now the balance was shifting, not with shouting or fists on the table, but with signed pages and a single phone call. By midnight, Graham texted courier confirmed. Documents will be in their hands by morning. I read the message twice, steadying my breath. I wasn't the powerless daughter they believed I was. I was the one who had prepared, the one who saw their script and wrote my own ending. I turned the key in the ignition, driving back toward the house with calm in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of choice pressing against my palms, and it was mine to hold. Dawn broke without sound. No clatter of dishes from the kitchen, no hum of the television in the living room, no voices carrying down the hall. I moved through the stillness of the house I had carried on my back for years and felt, for the first time, that it belonged to me. At the front door, the courier's envelope hung by a strip of tape, the bold type on the front impossible to miss. Notice of revocation of license to occupy. The words that had lived in drafts for months were now here in ink, undeniable, inside, by the entryway. I had already bagged their scattered belongings. Each duffel and box was neatly labeled Celine's clothes, Morella's trinkets, spare shoes, bathroom kits. Nothing tossed, nothing broken, no excuse for them to claim cruelty. Order was its own kind of statement. When the locksmith's van pulled into the drive, an officer followed close behind. Both men greeted me calmly, as if this were routine, which, in truth, it was. Locks changed every day, notices delivered every day. Today just happened to be mine. Morella shuffled into the hall, robe tied loose, her face creased with sleep. She froze at the sight of the officer, then tore the envelope from the door. Her hands shook as she unfolded the pages, eyes scanning the lines. I watched the color drain from her face the moment she understood. "You," she whispered, voice cracking. I stepped closer, steady and quiet. "Check your certified mail." The 4 words I had given her before now returned, no longer a warning, but a fact. She clutched the paper, lips moving as if to form a protest. But nothing came. By the time the new locks clicked into place, the silence of the house no longer felt heavy. It felt clean, as though something had finally been swept out. By afternoon, Morella was on the phone with every relative she could reach. Her voice carried through the walls, trembling with outrage as she painted me ungrateful and cold. She repeated the same line to anyone who would listen, that I had stolen the house from under my sister. But words travel faster than she expected. And so do documents, screenshots of my mortgage receipts, the title in my name, and even the notices Graham had prepared began to circulate quietly among the family. One cousin messaged me directly, saying, "I didn't know you carried all of that by yourself." Another wrote, "She's been telling a very different story." The cracks spread quickly, her version of events losing polish each time the truth surfaced. Celine's fury arrived next. She stormed into the living room, waving the notice as if it might change if she shook it hard enough. "You promised me, Mom!" she hissed, loud enough for me to hear from the hall. "You said this would be mine." Morella tried to hush her, but Celine's anger broke through years of careful shielding. Their alliance bent, then snapped. With the shouting came the memory's old betrayals pushed into daylight. The time Morella had used my savings account to cover one of Celine's failed ventures without asking. The night Celine had listed the house online as an event space for her friends, leaving me to deal with strangers knocking on my door. Every compromise I had swallowed came rushing back, undeniable now that the walls echoed with their arguments. That evening, Mrs. Keaton stopped me by the mailbox. Her eyes were kind. Her words simple. "It's not cruel," she said softly, "to lock a door that keeps stealing your sleep." I nodded, the truth of it settling deep in my chest. The house was quieter than it had ever been, but in that silence, something new was beginning to take shape. With the shouting gone, the house felt like bare wood waiting for new paint. I started small, rolling a fresh coat of color over the walls that had once carried Morella's floral wallpaper. The scent of paint replaced the heavy perfume that used to linger in the halls. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming space I had long ago surrendered. I cleared the guest room and set up a studio for my work. My desk faced the window now, sunlight spilling across clean surfaces instead of dim corners. The space no longer felt like a hiding place. It was mine, open and steady. For the first time in years, I invited people in. Friends from work came by for tea, their voices rising in easy laughter that filled the rooms. Mrs. Keaton joined us too, bringing lemon cookies on a tray, and she smiled as if she'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. The same rooms that had once echoed with hostility now hummed with warmth. I laid out new rules and kept them simple. No guests without consent, no filming or posting the house online. The rules weren't for anyone else, they were for me, proof that I would no longer let my silence be mistaken for permission. When Graham stopped by to check on me, he glanced at the changes and nodded. "A boundary is a contract you keep with yourself," he said. I knew then that these walls, freshly painted and breathing with light, were no longer just shelter. They were the outline of a new life, one I had built on my own terms. And as the house settled into its new rhythm, I could feel the final test still waiting on the horizon. It didn't take long for Morella and Celine to circle back. They showed up together one afternoon, their smiles tight, their words polished. Morella spoke first, dressing it all in the language of family optics. She insisted we needed to appear united, that neighbors and relatives were misunderstanding the situation. Celine nodded along, though her eyes flicked around the house as if still searching for a corner she might claim. I listened without interrupting. Then I laid my terms on the table, calm but unbending. Therapy, together and apart. An apology that named the years of harm instead of skimming over them. And most of all, no mention of the title. Not once. Not ever again. Their faces faltered, the performance cracking. They had expected forgiveness handed out like another check to cash. What they received instead was a mirror. After they left, Silence settled back into the walls. I gathered my papers and went to the notary, filing an estate plan that locked down the house's future. If they ever thought to claw at it again, they would find iron instead of flesh. Driving home, I felt lighter. A house, I realized, is nothing but wood and walls. It can be built, sold, or lost. But a home is different. It is the space where you refuse to barter away your dignity. That was what I had built here, not with money alone, but with the choice to stop shrinking myself. I locked the door that evening, watered the fern on the porch, and picked up my bag for work. Behind me, the house stood quiet, mine in more ways than a deed could ever prove.